It still amazes me how far we've come. Hola.
¿Vais haciendo el camino?
Sí.
Sí,
Va a tener bastante difícil.
sí, es muy difícil.
Lo sabéis.
Sí.
Turn your tired eyes toward the landed pride. Fickle fortune favors.
That's been something that's so rare. I haven't seen a friendship like that before.
And I don't know how much time you have. You know.
Mechanical malfunction.
It's hard not to feel like a burden in this.
So, fabrication.
Oh, I'm cramping.
I think his body's kind of feeling the effects of it the last several days.
Thinking that will bring about.
It sucks. I'm trying not to let Jess know that it sucks, though. Man, I do not like who I am.
Okay, seriously, dude, it's time to walk.
I'm just faking it, guys.
I have no idea how far this goes. I don't either. Sometimes it's best not to know.
It's really hard to let somebody do that for you.
Yo, what's up, bro?
I don't know how we're going to be able to do it. It was not faith. These are waters that are too deep for me to handle on my own. That's pretty stupid. Honey, I love you if I die. Love you.
If I do have the time that I have here now, then let's enjoy it.
Well, welcome to High Desert Church, and welcome to all our campuses here in Victorville. We're excited to be with you, and out in Apple Valley, and Phelan, and Hesperia. We're just excited that you're watching with us today. If you need a copy of the notes or a Bible, would you raise your hand, and our team will get those to you. Today we have Patrick and Justin with us, and they are just legitimate. They love the Lord. They live in Eagle, Idaho. They attend Eagle Nazarene Church, and as I was up there, we were talking with them. They are involved in a regular small group that meets every Monday night, and they're living life. They're doing life together with others. They have a genuine faith in the Lord, and it's just an incredible thing. And I love what you're going to hear today. Is you're going to hear that drip of oikos throughout this entire presentation. They don't even know what the word means, but you know what it means. And you're gonna hear how God has supernaturally and strategically placed people in their life to encourage them in the kingdom, and how God has supernaturally and strategically placed them in other people's lives to advance the kingdom. It's gonna be powerful. You're gonna hear about how the Apostle Paul says in Galatians chapter 6 that if we bear the burdens of one another, in this way it says that you fulfill the law of Christ. And you're gonna hear and you're gonna see these drips of how that is true in their story. It's gonna be very powerful. They've written a book at all our campuses. You can pick up this book after service and buy it. Love for you to pick that up. If we sell out, you can go to their website, illpushyou.com, or you can go to Amazon as well. I think we probably will sell out, so you can do that. But why don't we all put our hands together as we welcome Patrick and Justin at every campus here, all right? All right, this is gonna be the last.
There's some energy this morning.
All right.
Thank you. It's like the world's shortest speech. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you later. No. Oh, love the energy this morning. How awesome is that? Well, thank you so much for having us. We are very, very blessed and honored to be a part of the HDC family this weekend. So thank you so much for having us. We are very, very grateful to be here. I'm Justin Skizik, and this is my BFF forever, Patrick Gray. So thanks for having us. Appreciate it.
Thank you. So this morning we're going to tell you some stories. Justin and I have been blessed with a pretty amazing friendship I think about it often and how lucky I am to have him in my life. And with that much history, this kind of history we share, you get lots of stories, especially when you're hanging out with this guy, because he's got some pretty crazy ideas. But as we share some stories with you, we want you to kind of focus kind of your lens as you look at these stories to the concept of provision. We're going to dive into Matthew 25 here in a little bit, but that whole idea of provision is something that I've struggled with a lot in life. And at the end of the day, really, so many times, you and I are God's provision for the people around us if we step into relationship and we embrace that concept. So have that idea in the back of your head as we share some stories with you. But before we dive in too much into the stories themselves, Justin's going to give you a little bit of backstory or some history on how this all came about.
Yeah, so Patrick and I have known each other for over 42 years. We were born just over 36 hours apart in the same hospital, same small town in Eastern Oregon. And it's going to get a little creepy on you, so hang with me for a second. Our mothers have known each other since the 4th grade. Our collective parents have known each other since college. And then as we were working on our book last year, we found out that my great uncle was best man in Patrick's grandfather's wedding.
It's kind of weird.
A little weird.
Strange.
But there's a picture of us when we're little. On the far to your far left is Patrick. Looks like he's playing with his nipples.
You said nipples in every service.
Yes, I said nipples in this earlier service. So that's the kind of morning we're gonna have today. So it's like super sexy polyester outfit he's got going on.
I think it's a tablecloth my mom just took off a picnic table and made some clothes out of.
Yeah. There's a family friend in the middle, and then I'm on the right. And then there's us graduating from high school together. So we have been very, very blessed to have a lifelong friendship, and we've just choose to live life with one another and pursue one another in friendship and in brotherhood with one another. So we've been very grateful. So all was well growing up, not getting into too much trouble, little things here and there, but pretty good kids. Went to church, did youth group stuff, went to different elementary schools, but same middle school, same high school. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about my personal journey so you can understand why I'm in a wheelchair. Just shy of my 16th birthday, I was driving from my hometown to a nearby town to play in a basketball tournament with a friend of mine, not Patrick, but another friend. And he ended up rolling his truck on the freeway going about 80 miles an hour. And I ended up walking away from that accident, some scrapes and bruises, completely shaken up, and I didn't think anything other than just kind of going through this crazy car accident. But about 6 months later, I started noticing weakness in my left foot. I was running down the soccer field playing soccer that following fall, and my foot was just flopping around. It wasn't working the way that it should. And so I brought it to my parents' attention, and you naturally go see a doctor, and he was completely stumped, and he says, I think you need to go see a neurologist. I don't quite know what's going on here, so I think it's something nerve-related. So thus became my lifelong pursuit of being in doctor's offices. And several years later, skipping to my early to mid-20s, I was finally diagnosed with my 5th diagnosis, and it's the one I have now. It's called, are you guys ready? It's a mouthful. It's called multifocal acquired motor axonopathy. You guys remember that? Probably not. You probably just forgot it right now, right? It's okay. To give you some context, it is almost identical to ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. It's a very rare autoimmune progressive neuromuscular disease, and it was triggered by that car accident I was in. I didn't know that you could have a dormant disease in your body and a traumatic incident can actually start it. More than likely, it would have shown symptoms in my 30s or 40s, but kind of started it early. And I'll tell you what, it's a challenge. You know, started my left foot, went up my left leg, went to my right leg, just kind of stayed to my waist and below for quite some time, and just kind of managed life. Just still kept moving through it. I graduated college in Southern California and met my wife, who's an amazing woman. Her name's Kirsten, and started building a family. I have kids, started having children, and just was, slowly but surely the disease was working its way through my body. And I'm going to skip ahead to the winter of 2010. The January of that year, early on in that year, I started noticing weakness in my upper right shoulder. And in this case, within about 40 days or so, I had lost 60 to 70% of my upper body use. So my arms and hands went very, very quickly. So, how do you eat? How do you go to the bathroom? How do you get your clothes on? How do you brush your teeth? How do you go, shower? And, I'm a parent by this point, so how do I become a effective parent to my children and help my spouse? How do I eat? There's so many challenges that I hit a wall. And Pat will probably tell you I'm kind of a half glass full type of guy. I'm just kind of wired that way. But this is the first time in my life where I just saw complete darkness. I describe it as a deep, dark hole. And if any of you have ever been there, it is a horrible, horrible place to be. Because you can't see your way out. And you really start questioning, what is my purpose here? What is my existence on this planet? Why is this happening to me? And what's this outcome? That's my life. What's going to happen to me? And I realized there's two roads you could go down. I could go down the easy route, which is, you know what? If I decide to take my own life and just kill the burden, get it out of the way, my wife wouldn't have to deal with me anymore, and my family wouldn't have to deal with me anymore, and because I'm basically becoming like a little kid again. And that's an easy route to take. Or I could just try to make lemonade out of lemons. Just do the best I could. Just, every day, just focus on the blessings on my life, focus on people that love me and support me and are cheering me on, and just keep moving through life. Focus on the light. And man, I had never leaned so hard on Christ, on those around me. Man, I prayed and prayed and prayed. And slowly but surely started working my way out of that.
So same period of time, 2010. At this point in time, Justin's living in San Diego with his family. I'm living up in Idaho with my family. We're about 1,000 miles apart and had been since college. But we had been very intentional with staying in connection, spending time together on trips, vacations. We would vacation down there with his family. He would come up to Idaho and vacation with us. So when you have that kind of person in your life, you're just connected in so many ways that you can read them very well, even over the phone. And in January, when Justin called me on the phone to tell me that his hands, well, actually his shoulder initially had started to feel weakness there, I could tell there's a difference in his voice. And when the phone call came again a few weeks later and it started to spread through his upper body, he's still, he's in this spot. His countenance is totally different than anything I'd experienced with Justin. I mean, when you said earlier that he's a half glass full kind of guy, I probably wouldn't describe him that way. I'd probably describe him as annoyingly positive. But, sorry. But then the phone call comes when his hands start to go. And at this point, as he's dealing with his own deep, dark hole, I kind of go down my own. What Justin hasn't told you is that his career at this point in time is a graphic designer. So think about the implications of losing your hands. He's at a computer designing stuff for clients all over the country every day, and suddenly that's taken away. And so as I'm trying to wrestle with this situation that he's facing, as he's trying to just struggle through the darkness that he's facing, I become very angry at God. I pray for healing, I pray for a miracle, I pray for intervention on my friend's behalf. And the harder I pray, the more distant it seems like this answer to prayer becomes. And for 2 years, I become angry at a God who has failed my friend. It's like, how dare you take away his hands, right? I mean, how dare you take away his ability to provide for his family? How dare you, I mean, you're a God of all things, how dare you take away his ability to hold his kids, to wrestle with his boys, to hold his wife's hand, to hug somebody? I was bitter, I was pissed off at a God who had failed. So I thought. But 2 years went by. Justin and his family ended up visiting my wife and I and our kids in Idaho. And it was at the end of a church service where we're milling around, we're chatting with people, and a mutual friend took Justin aside and asked him a question. And as they're in this conversation, I made it a point to eavesdrop because I was curious what they were talking about. And because that's what friends do, right? And this gentleman, his name is Ed, he asked Justin the question, if you knew you could have your hands and your feet back right now, would you choose it? Like, I know the answer to that question, right? And so I'm standing there waiting for Justin's response, knowing what he's gonna say. And he says, no, I would not. I'm like, no, that's the wrong answer. That is the wrong answer. But it was the answer I wanted, not the answer he needed. And it clicked, because for 2 years, I had been fighting a battle that he wasn't fighting. I had been praying a prayer that he wasn't praying. I had been looking for a miracle, but I didn't realize the miracle already happened. Because sometimes, more often than not, I would argue the miracle isn't divine intervention for healing. It is the ability to face an unknown future with grace and dignity. Oh, it clicked. He didn't need a miracle. It already happened. He just needed me to step in and be hands and feet, to be provision in the situation, and I had failed to do so effectively for 2 years. That's a humbling thing to come to face with when you realize you have failed someone you love so much. But as this new perspective starts to unfold in my brain, I realize, oh my gosh, there's something here that is so much more than what we have lived up until now. Like, when I stepped into the relationship with a different perspective, we had a cementing together where our relationship just transformed. It was just that much deeper because of the gift I got to receive by him allowing me to help him in so many ways. And with this new perspective, man, we started to experience just new levels of intimacy, new levels of friendship, just new possibilities in life. Something else you know about Justin is that not only is he annoyingly positive, is that he also is the guy that when he says, I got an idea, you're like, okay. What is it this time, right? and he's going to tell you a little bit about a doozy of an idea.
Hey, while I'm telling, can you fix my microphone real quick?
Yeah.
Hold on a second. There we go. So you guys can hear me. That's even better, isn't it? So nondescript Saturday morning in the spring of 2012, I find myself watching TV by myself. Just this rare moment of peace where my kids are playing somewhere and my wife is doing what she so beautifully does, is getting the house in order. And I stumbled across this TV show on PBS from Rick Steves Europe. Anybody familiar with Rick Steves? Who's familiar with him? Woohoo! Yeah, a few of you. Isn't he like the nerdiest travel guy in the world? Those of you who don't know who he is, look him up. Seriously, he's awesome. But you know, this episode, I was like, okay, this looks interesting. Just checking it out. It was on northern Spain, Pamplona, running of the bulls, that whole thing. If you've ever heard of that before, and this pilgrimage across northern Spain called the Camino de Santiago. And I was like, okay, this is interesting. And as I was watching this episode unfold in front of me, something inside of me just clicked. I just knew from my heart, my soul, my mind, everything was aligned at that moment. And it was this very, very clear, just feeling, no matter how crazy it sounded, that I knew that I needed to try this pilgrimage. I needed to try it, at least try it. So I called my wife into the room and I said, hey honey, what do you think about this? And she said, if you want to go do it, go do it. And I'm thinking, either she's really supportive or she wants to kick me out of the house for a month. So my guess is probably a little bit of both, but she was just right from the get-go, just very, very supportive. And a couple weeks later, Patrick was now visiting me in San Diego. And I had recorded the episode, and as we were sitting in my living room, I showed him the episode, and I remember it very clearly, sitting off to my right, and I showed the whole thing to him, and I said, so, do you want to go across 500 miles of northern Spain with me? And he said, I'll push you. That was his response. I kid you not. That's what he said. So we both go, all right. Literally have no idea what we're getting ourselves into, as you will soon find out.
It's remarkable naivety. So by a show of hands, how many of you have heard of the Camino de Santiago for today? A few of you, okay. Anybody got on it?
Raise your hand high if you've gone on. No?
All right.
Oh, one person? No. You're
Okay.
itching your head.
Well,
sorry, man.
The Camino de Santiago dates back to the 9th century. It's an ancient pilgrimage, and the history tells it that the bones of St. James were discovered and moved to a location in Santiago where the cathedral was built over his bones. And so it became a destination for a lot of people. Originally, in the Catholic Church, in the Catholic tradition, it was a place to go for this pilgrimage, and people would just literally walk out their front door from all over Europe and head to Santiago. It's a crazy, crazy journey. But over time, different trade routes became established pilgrimage routes because the roads were a little easier to travel. The most heavily traveled and probably the most famous route would be what's called the French Way, which is the one we chose to take. The French Way starts in the southwestern corner of France, in a little town called Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port. It goes up and over the Pyrenees mountain range, 500 miles east to west, and you finish in the northwestern corner of Spain, and it's the city of Santiago de Compostela. You cross 3 mountain ranges, 150 miles of what they call a desert. It's more like Kansas with this wheat fields as far as you can see. But varying terrain, it's a beautiful experience. Because on this pilgrimage, you've got 3 decisions that you make each day. Is how far am I gonna walk? Where am I gonna eat? Where am I gonna sleep? So there's no distractions. And so you have a remarkable amount of human interaction. You meet people from all over the world, and you have time to connect in ways that kind of really are counter to what we experience in day-to-day life. But I would argue is the kind of connection and relationship that we're called to have. Just imagine any one of you and I or Justin spend 8 hours in constant contact, in conversation about all things in life. Like, we actually met people that we walked with for one day that we knew better than people we had known for years because of those kind of interactions. You stay in what are called albergues, or hostels for pilgrims, and it's just a simple way of life. But we didn't really get to embrace that way of life until after we got through day one.
So day one, we had to go over a mountain range in one day. We had to go over the Pyrenees in a wheelchair. Had never been done before in its history. So along for the ride for the first week, our buddy Ted Hardy, who's a firefighter EMT from our neck of the woods. I had now since relocated back from San Diego back to Idaho, so I knew Ted prior to going on this pilgrimage. So Ted came along with us for the week or so, and to kind of get us over the Pyrenees and to get us acclimated for, walking 500 miles, because it's a lot of walking. And when we left St. Jean, it is straight uphill all day long. It's a 17-mile day, and we have to commit. You just have to go. So as we left, we were going straight up. There's my specialized wheelchair that I took. I didn't take this one. I took a specialized one that was made for me. I affectionately describe it as a 3-wheeled baby jogger on steroids. That's basically what it is. And to give you a little bit of perspective, with me in it, the weight of the chair and our gear, it's about 250 pounds. Yeah, quite heavy. And it is just, as you're climbing, you're going up and up and up. And some sections were as steep as 30% grades. So very, very steep sections. There's Patrick about to throw up. We're 3 miles in.
Yeah, do the math, right? I was 3 miles in. It means I got 14 more miles to go, and I'm doing this. This is
That's
not good.
Not good. But we're working our way up, and we're climbing and climbing and climbing, and we're going, just inch by inch. And we're on roads, we're on kind of trail sections, and then it goes back to roads, and we're just getting higher and higher up into the Pyrenees, and we work our way up to this stone cross. We see this kind of stone cross monument ahead of us, and we stop to take a break. And as we're braking, I look ahead, and I'm looking at the trail, and I turn to Patrick and Ted, and I say, oh no, that can't be the trail. It's just rocks and boulders, and it's one of those really, really steep sections. And so we brought a packable sling for, a little bit of foresight on this. So we brought a packable sling. So Pat and Ted put me in this sling, and I had to be carried. There's no way to go over this section. I had to be picked up, and we're working our way. You can see how high we are. You can't even see the valley floor. That's how high we are. And we're going about, 10, 15, 20 feet at a time. Pat and Ted would pick me up, carry me, set me back down, pick me up, carry me, set me back down. Just rinse and repeat over and over and over again. It took us about an hour and a half to go about 100 yards. And about 3/4 of the way through this, they set me down, and they're up scouting the trail. I'm kind of in this grassy area where it's just a place for me to lay down where they could let me rest for a minute. And as they're up scouting the trail, I'm just laying there with my head back and my eyes closed, and just trying to take in a peaceful moment through this chaotic thing that we're working through. And as I'm laying with my eyes closed, I hear footsteps come up behind me. And as I open my eyes, I see a man standing over the top of me, slapping me in the face. Man, he was so excited to see me. Just some guy, I have no idea where he came from. And I'm just laying there, and I'm like, hi, how's it going? And, he starts speaking to me in French, but I don't speak French, so I start speaking whatever Spanish I know, which is limited. And he switches over to Spanish, and he starts telling me how crazy I am, and how you have to be a little crazy in the head to do something like this. And I said, yes, we do. And he was so happy to see us.
So this gentleman, his path crossed ours for just 4 minutes. It was just a very brief interchange. But we did learn that he's a Basque farmer who's lived in this region his entire life. And for the past 12 years or so, he has taken it upon himself as basically a hobby to maintain one of the albergues that's on this path. Most of the albergues are buildings where you stay in communal living, but up in this in the mountains of the Pyrenees, this particular albergue is a cave. And it's got actually a wooden door that kind of seals over it, and just rock and shale that's built up around it. And it's there in case pilgrims get caught in inclement weather, especially during the winter. And he's been maintaining this hut for the past 12 years. But apparently he's never seen a couple idiot Americans trying to come over the Pyrenees in a wheelchair. And so he's really excited. And after he comes down, he slaps Justin in the face, and we talk for a bit. He heads back up the hill. But halfway up, he stops, and he puts his hands up, his fist, and he just says, the impossible is possible. The impossible is possible. 4 minutes. That was it. But his words had power. His words were provision in that moment. He just breathed life into us because we were so exhausted. And we had no idea what we were about to face. But I can tell you this, that these words were ringing through our ears as we faced what came next.
So after all this slapping ensues, prior to this is crazy too. I mean, this was a crazy day. We were sung to by an opera singer and blessed by a priest. So there was a lot happening. And I think I almost got attacked by a cow too. There was a cow that came about like 4 feet from my face, and I'm like, anyway, that's a whole nother story. But after Pat and Ted put me back in my chair, thinking we're through the worst of it, we come around the corner and we encounter hundreds of yards of mud. Some sections were as deep as a foot deep, 10 inches to about 12 inches deep, and with cliff on one side and mountain on the other, and there's just no way but to go through it. I mean, we couldn't go around it. And there's a really great quote that I learned, that sometimes the only way through something is through it, right? You gotta go through the mud and the muck and the mire in life sometimes, and you just have to go through it. There's no way to go around it. And you just have to just keep working through it, and we hit stretch after stretch of mud, and we're going uphill and uphill, and it's absolutely beautiful, beautiful countryside. And after 10 and a half hours, we finally summited. And there we are, we just crossed the French-Spanish border, looking down into Spain. And man, we were exhausted that day. But we learned a valuable, valuable lesson in life that day. That you can pretty much do anything for a day.
So,
trust us.
Yeah. And we learned this lesson on day 2. So, pretty early in the journey, we had some problems. So day 2 is supposed to be a pretty easy day. We're on what I would argue is the correct side of the Pyrenees. We started on the wrong side because we had to climb them. And this day is not terribly long. It's about 12 miles or so to the town we're trying to get to. The path that we're on is very wide. It's very hard packed. It's been trod by millions of pilgrims. A lot of pilgrims who decided to start in the town that we started in as opposed to St. John. And it's hard packed. It's smooth sailing. It's going to be easy on Justin in the chair. And I got a little cocky because of the previous day. I was thinking, man, this is pretty amazing. Like we just did something that's incredible, right? And one lesson is here, don't get cocky. It never works out well. So I'm walking next to Justin and Ted. Ted's giving me a break from pushing. And so we're on this path. There's a little bit of rain coming down. There's some trees kind of sheltering us a little bit. And I turn to the guys, and I'm like, guys, we just did the Pyrenees in a wheelchair. Never been done before, right? We totally got this. Stupid thing to say. Because as I trot down the trail to scope it out, it's kind of been in some trees, and there's just some rivers we got to cross. So I'm thinking about that, like what's the next obstacle? But the real problem is actually behind me, because as I'm running down the trail, the front wheel of Justin's 3-wheel baby jogger on steroids just snaps off from the strain from the previous day. And now we've got a 2-wheel rickshaw. And we're 2 miles to the nearest town. So we have an aluminum wheelchair, front wheel's broken off, we're 2 miles to the nearest town, we're in a foreign country, we're like, whoa, what do we do? But we meet some pilgrims who step in, and they can't help us physically, but they get us through encouragement and just walk with us. They help us get to the next town where they're actually staying. They invite us into the home where they're staying, and their host who's there is this gracious, gracious Spanish man who invites us in, cookies and coffee, and we're laughing, telling jokes, punchlines, I don't know what they are. And it's just an amazing experience. And then through their help, we actually wind up getting to Pamplona. Pamplona is a city of about 250,000 people. And we get there because we're trying to find someone who can fix this chair. So through a series of events, we actually wind up in a medical supply store in downtown Pamplona, where we meet this gentleman. His name is Ramon. Ramon is visiting his girlfriend who runs the counter at the medical supply store. And when we tell these guys our plight, we discover that Ramon's a welder. We're like, what are the odds? Don't get too hopeful yet. He doesn't do aluminum, so. But he's like, I know a guy that does this. So he calls his buddy, and his buddy comes down to downtown Pamplona, comes in the store, checks it out, and he's like, oh, no, it's way too complicated for me. But I know a guy. And so we get a series of phone calls, and we finally find some guy 7 phone calls later who is on the outskirts of Pamplona. He's a fabricator, does all aluminum. We load the chair up in a vehicle, get it over to him, and through the translator, I asked this gentleman, can you fix it? And his response is, I don't know. Come back tomorrow at 10 and find out. Like, all right. Not the most confident building, response, but we come back the next day, 48 hours from the time the wheel broke. We're back on the trail headed west to Santiago because the provision in someone's hands, because someone helped us in a tremendous, tremendous way. And man, for the next 26 days, we had experiences like this where people just stepped in and helped in all kinds of ways. And the thing is that we didn't ask for any of it. People just stepped in and helped because they saw a need and they filled it. And it was a remarkable, remarkable experience. Day 28, though, is a day that is, for Justin and I both, is probably one of the most profound experiences we've had in our entire lives.
So we're going to give you a little bit of context before we tell you about day 28, so you guys can understand what we're going to be talking about here. So about a week prior, we were in one of the major cities that you pass through on the pilgrimage, and it's called Burgos. It's the city of Burgos, beautiful city, old city that has a cathedral in the center of the city. And we found ourselves in this cathedral, just checking it out, Patrick and I by ourselves. And as we were there, we hear from across the cathedral, hey, aren't you Justin and Patrick? Yeah, like who's asking? And these 2 guys walk over to us, and this guy introduces himself. He says, my name's Joe, it's my buddy Richard. We're from Boise, Idaho, which is where we live. I'm like, small world, okay. And we start talking, and they said, do you guys need some help coming up? And so we said, yeah, of course. I mean, we could always use help. But he said, we were really kind of figuring out where we could use the most help. And along this pilgrimage, as Pat mentioned earlier, you go over a few different mountain ranges, and by that point, we're going to be coming up on our 3rd mountain pass. It's called Osobero. It's a very, very steep ascent. And we had many pilgrims and locals tell us that, even doing it on foot is really, really difficult. So pushing a 250-pound wheelchair, you might want to really think twice about it. And through our conversation with Joe and Richard, we all decided that, we're gonna at least give it a shot. We're gonna meet at the base of the mountain that day, which is day 28. So here we are on day 28. We agree to meet them at this little village, and we show up, and we see them, we give hugs and high fives and all that stuff, and there's a cafe there, and there's a little supermarket to get some provisions, because that day we had to walk 11 miles, then climb a mountain. So it was gonna be a long, hard day. So we need to get a little bit of recharge, before we attempt this mountain. So here we are, we're at this cafe, charging up, just resting for a bit, and we get up to leave, and the entire cafe gets up. Everyone. And we turn to Joe and Richard, and we're like, who are all these people? And they said, they're here to help you. So what do you mean? So yeah, we've been sitting here for the last couple hours, and one by one, fellow pilgrims have been coming by and asking why they were waiting. And they said, we're gonna get Justin and Patrick up Osobero. Justin's in a wheelchair. So one by one, they all stopped. And by the time we got there were about 12 people waiting for us. So we get up, we meet everybody, and we're gonna show you some footage from our documentary that's called I'll Push You. It's coming out in theaters for a one-night special event. It's Thursday, November 2nd, and it's actually playing here in Victorville. How cool is that? So, and there's another one in, not Apple Valley, but there's another one around here too. So there's 2 theaters playing it. But we're gonna show you footage from that day. So here we are, we had just left that village, and we're working our way up to the trailhead. And the trailhead splits. It's like it goes a really, really steep trail or a very, very steep road. And everyone turns around and looks at me and says, Justin, what do you want to do? And I said, life's never easy, let's take the trail. So, all right, let's go. Everyone just jumped in. And I kid you not, those people that warned us about the trail were not kidding. It was, as soon as we come around the corner, it was straight uphill. It was so steep that there was no way but my wheelchair to be carried. I had to be literally carried up this mountain. It took six people to carry me at any given time. And while those people are carrying me, the remaining people are scouting the trail or carrying the remaining person's backpacks. And it's just like this amazing, beautiful human symphony of working our way up this mountain. I'm being pushed and pulled and manhandled all the way up this mountain. And as we're going up and up, we're going through these little villages where these the people are out looking at us going, what is this thing coming through here? And by the time we get towards the top, we're escorted by the police. Like this like mountain rescue people show up out of nowhere and they're like, we're gonna get you to the top. And we're like, yeah. So here we are at the top of Osobero that day. 17 people in total. We ended up picking up people along the way. What an amazing example of community, of coming together and just seeing a need and filling that need. You know, as I get to share this story with you all, I'm reliving it in my mind from, it's like this perfectly preserved movie that's playing in my head, and I can see all of the emotions, I can see all of the experience and everyone around me, and they're all doing it for me. The disease that I live with is very humbling. And from the moment I have to get up in the morning till the moment I go to bed at night, I have to have people put on my clothes, I have to be fed, I have to be helped in the bathroom, I have to be helped in the shower, I have to be helped in pretty much every aspect of my life. And it is a very difficult pill to swallow. Because, all these people in my daily life, as well as these people on this pilgrimage, they're doing it for me. And throughout my life, I've been learning a lot of lessons along the way. But one lesson that was really, really cemented for me on this day is something I'd like to share with you all. And it goes like this. When you deny someone the opportunity to help you, you deny them the joy in life. Let me say that again. When you deny someone the opportunity to help you, you deny them joy in life. It's amazing what happens when you let people come in to be your hands and feet. In my case, literally. In some of your cases, it may not be as literal as mine. But I must encourage you to let people in. It takes 3 little letters. Yes. I know it's hard. It's not an easy thing. It's not like this switch you turn on one day and you're good. It's a continual muscle that you need to flex day in and day out. But I can tell you, you can climb mountains.
These 17 people, again, provision, right? We want to tell you a story about one of these individuals in particular that we actually met on, I want to say it was day 11, day 12. This is Claudia. And Claudia was actually with us on day 28, but we had met her quite a bit earlier. Claudia is an amazing young woman from South Africa, and her life collided with ours. And she's on the Camino. We meet, and she wants to help. And so she offers assistance. One of many people who just step in and say, can I help? And there were 2 rules if you're gonna help. 1, you gotta tell us about yourself, and 2, you can't kill Justin. So she agreed to both rules.
She almost did kill me, by the way.
She was chasing the butterfly, that's true, yeah, she did. Yeah. It's another story. But Claudia steps in, and she starts to push Justin. And as she does, she begins to just kind of unload a pretty heart-wrenching story, something that we're not prepared to hear. Give you some context, is that Claudia, in December of 2013, so New Year's Eve, she's down in South Africa with her mother and her father and her sister and some other people, and they're celebrating the old year leaving, the new year coming. And they have a tradition where they get together every single year. They celebrate with good wine, good food, good games, whatever they're doing. They're just playing life, right? They're having life. They live life together, and they're celebrating this. And their tradition is that when they get together, they commemorate the old year leaving and the new year coming in with a photo at midnight. So they have a camera set up with a 10-second timer counting down the last 10 seconds to midnight, and that camera captures the moment when the new year comes in. But at that moment when the camera actually captures this family together, masked gunmen break into the home, and her father is struck with a shotgun blast, and he dies. He's murdered in front of her. And now she's on the Camino trying to make a sense of a grief that she's wrestling with, but she can't understand. And she's angry, she's bitter, she's sad, she's depressed, she's confused. She has all the emotions that you can possibly have going on in her brain at once, and she doesn't know what to do with it. And she's telling us this story, and we don't know what to do with it. 2 days later, Claudia is still with us, and we're outside of a town called Castor Harris, and we're trying to make it up a hill that is not terribly tall, but it's steep, and it's loose gravel, and she's out front, pulling like an ox the entire way. And through her efforts and the efforts of several other pilgrims, we get to the top of this hill, and we celebrate. We conquered it. We're hugging each other and giving each other kisses on the cheek, and then she takes off. We don't see her again until the end of the day, just that night, and then our paths diverge for quite some time. But 2 days after this ascent outside of Castor Harris, we get an email from Claudia where she is wanting to thank us for that day. And she says in the email, "The only way I know how to thank you adequately is to share my journal entry about the climb outside of Castor Harris." Justin's gonna read that journal entry.
Everyone doing all right? You guys hanging in there? Okay. She does give us permission to share this, so just for the record. "Ready?" asked Patrick. "Yes, ready," we all reply as we flex our muscles and prepare ourselves for the exertion and exhaustion that lies ahead of us. I'm strapped into a harness at the front next to John, who is a 60-year-old recycling specialist / U.S. naval officer and regular at the Burning Man Festival in Nevada. "We look like a pair of oxen," I say with a smile to him as he wheezes and splutters next to me, beads of sweat sliding off his chin and onto the steep gravel path below us. While John and I do the pulling up in the front, Patrick is pushing with a firm grip on the steel bar at the back. He has calves the size of span specks, which are cantaloupes. Had to Google that one. After doing this for almost 2 weeks, he is flanked by 2 Swiss girls who we met halfway up this hill. They started their Camino in Burgos, so they've only been walking for 2 days, and their fresh, unstable blisters are screaming at them with every step they take. Despite the shooting pain, they continue to push onwards and upwards with the rest of us. We're only halfway up this hill, and all 5 of us know that giving up is not an option. "You guys are awesome," says Justin as he sits strapped tightly into his wheelchair as we slowly heave him up the hill. Patrick and Justin are similar for their enthusiasm for life and their insatiable appetites for adventure. Patrick does most of the pushing, and I've actually started to think of him as an extension of Justin's body. He wipes sweat from his brow, rearranges his legs, and holds an ice-cold drink up to his mouth after a long day of trudging through the flat Spanish plains, baking in the hot sun. I can't even begin to imagine how difficult it must have been for them to climb over the steep, rocky Pyrenees mountain range with its mudslides and loose gravel. When Justin told me about his condition, I said, "I'm sorry to hear about that." "There's absolutely nothing to be sorry about," he responded. Back on the steep hill, we are finally within 20 meters of the top. "The final push," gasped Patrick, while Justin sings a slightly out-of-tune rendition of "That's What Friends Are For." That's what friends are for. That's that song, okay. John, the oldest in our group by a few good decades, has tapped out, and we've replaced him with a passing pilgrim called Matt, who is now in the harness next to me, ready to pull like an ox. Patrick's sweat is cascading down his face, and the 2 Swiss girls next to him look like they're equal parts exhausted and excited. We've been fighting our way up this hill for almost an hour and a half. "Ready?" asked Patrick. "Yes, ready," we all reply. and we're off, inching our way up. A choir of heavy breathing. As we get closer to the top, Justin begins a countdown. 10, 9, 8. No, I think to myself, this can't be happening. The last time I did a countdown, it was followed by unimaginable cruelty. 7, 6, 5. Maybe I should ask them to stop. 4, my calves are aching. 3, I'd be happy if I never have to endure another countdown for the rest of my life. 2, I don't know if I can do this, but I'll do it for Justin. 1, we get to the top and we're hugging each other, doing a victory dance, celebrating and kissing each other on the cheeks. And I'm crying because I didn't believe that a countdown from 10 could ever be happy again. At the end of the day, we sip our ice-cold drinks in a small Spanish town. The sun hangs low in the sky and makes me realize there must be at least 1 million different shades of gold, and that all of them are visible during a meseta at sunset. Justin looks at me and says, "Thanks for getting me up that hill today." I look back at him and say, "No, Justin, it was you who got me up that hill."
Yeah. That's one of many stories that we could tell you. And what's beautiful about this is that while Justin and I got to be a part of her story, a little bit a part of that kind of new perspective, she profoundly impacted us because of a willingness to set down a burden she was carrying, even for a moment, and be hands and feet. She was provision to the both of us in a remarkable way. And the phrase or the term or the idea of hands and feet is never directly referenced in the Bible, not one time. But it is illustrated in such an amazing way in Matthew 25. And so we're going to turn there real quick and look at the parable of the goats and the sheep. So Matthew 25, 31 to 40. When the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, he will sit on his throne in heavenly glory. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate the people one from another as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. He will put the sheep on his right and the goats on his left. Then the king will say to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, make your inheritance the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you clothed me, or you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me." Then the righteous will answer him, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go to visit you?" The king will reply, "I tell you the truth, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers of mine, you did for me." While that's a parable looking at the goats and the sheep, there is a theme with the sheep that is profound. It is a theme that we should grab onto as followers of Christ. It is a theme that really is the embodiment of love, the love that we are called to live, because the sheep don't understand in that moment that they have loved on God through their loving of other people. Think about that. They don't even get it. It's so ingrained in who they are. It's a part of their DNA. They're loving people just to love them. There's no agenda. There's no notch on a belt. I see someone in need, I'm gonna love them. They're clothing the naked, they're feeding the hungry. Their hands and feet. And Jesus is illustrating this is what my love looks like, because the world is only gonna know my love through you. We're plan A and there is no plan B. People will know, right? Yeah. People will know God's love through who you and I choose to be. We are God's provision. And because of Claudia, and because of a friend Ted who flew over from the United States to spend 10 days with us, and countless individuals who fought for us to get from St. John to Santiago, we made it. We made it because people were provisioned, hands and feet. It's amazing.
Day 35. Thank you. Day 35. One day ahead of schedule. We come into Santiago, and as we're working our way into Santiago, you end at the base of the cathedral where the bones of St. James are buried. And as we are working our way into the square, we were greeted by many of the pilgrims who had helped us that have gone before us. And they were walking us into the square, cheering us on and clapping us in. And I describe it as probably what it's going to be like when we die to go to heaven, is to have many of our friends welcoming us in and saying, thank you for being here, you made it. And I have no idea who that guy is right there. I have no idea. He's a total stalker. You'll see him in a second. But as we're working our way into the square, at the very end, at the center of the square, are our wives. We had not seen our wives in 5.5 weeks. 5 weeks. It's my wife, Kirsten, and Patrick's wife, Donna. Kirsten got her wish of kicking me out of the house for a month. Both of our wives, we can definitely say for the record, we married up. There he is. I love having a stalker. It's awesome. But our wives just supported us and have loved us and said, go do this. The world needs to see this. The world needs to hear this. There's Joe in the green and Richard in the tan. We still see these guys and keep in touch with many of the pilgrims that we had met along the way. So amazing, amazing experience. And it never would have happened without my best friend saying yes. Right? How crazy is that? Pretty awesome.
So, thank you. As we close, I want to revisit that scripture, Matthew 25, the sheep. So many people embodied that on this journey. So many people embody it in life. And the reality is that we all have mountains we're facing. Sometimes they're literal, sometimes they're metaphorical. So we all have challenges, like an illness that has no cure, or struggles in life where it might be, it can be debt, it can be addictions, it can be anything. They're all mountains that we face. And the reality is the only way to face those effectively is through the provision of God. And that comes from those around us. Someone sitting next to you needs you to be provision for them, just as you need someone to be provision for you. We are God's love if we choose to be. So please, choose love. Let's close in prayer.
Let's bow our heads, please. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this beautiful, beautiful day and this opportunity to be together with one another, to share in fellowship with one another, to pray with one another, to sing and to be blessed upon one another. You are our love, our light, our guide in this world, and we are very, very grateful. We love you. Bless everyone this week in the world that they live in and the people they interact with. Let them be the light and the love to the world around them. I ask this in your name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, everybody.